are the Lit Ladies.
I'm Christie.
I'm Kelly.
And I'm Carissa.
3 writers and moms exploring how to live out our faith in our literary lives.
We span the country from the coast to the Midwest. And with different stages of life, careers, and favorite genres, we're sure to cover the literary landscape.
In every episode, we'll discuss books we love, reading life, and writing craft, using the Bible as our guide for beauty, goodness, and truth. New episodes drop every other Friday.
Welcome to the Lit Ladies. It's our Thanksgiving episode, and what better topic around the holidays than families? I'm sure we all have family stories handed down through generations, or maybe some at our own holiday tables. Today we'll discuss family dynamics within literature. We'll discuss some of our favorites, what resonates with us, and what we think our favorite characters would do for Thanksgiving. To get us started, we'll talk a little bit how we each celebrate Thanksgiving. Do either of you have favorite traditions or ways you celebrate?
When we first got married, we tried to fit everyone in, and we basically bounced from place to place, just overstuffing ourselves. So now we have it down, I wouldn't say to an art, but we spend Thanksgiving with my in-laws and Christmas with my family. And my in-laws introduced me to green bean casserole, which I had never had growing up. We just grew stuff in the garden, and that's how we ate it. Like, we didn't make we were not a casserole family, but I love it. When I used to eat with my family, my moms, my aunts, my grandma did most of the cooking. I'm not much of a cook. I can make a dessert, and I always do the dishes because at least I can clean if I can't cook.
Hey, wait, I have
That's
a question
the way
about
I feel.
this. I love Thanksgiving. I have a question about the green bean casserole. Is it like canned green beans with cream of mushroom soup, or is it
Oh, for
fresh?
sure. It is everything not fresh. It is so preservative packed, I'm sure, but for some reason, I really like it.
Oh, I love that. I make it every year, and it's so easy. I've seen people do a fresh version, but I like the canned version. Okay, for Thanksgiving, for the last several years, my best friend, her husband, and their 4 kids come visit us. So they stay with my husband and I and my 3 kids. So between us all, we have 7 kids. And it is absolute insanity in the very best way possible. So we actually have several days of fun activities. And my friend and I try to send the dads out with all the kids so we can cook in the morning. And
Nice.
It is just my favorite tradition. I live near family, so I get to see family all year round. So I especially like this because I get to spend it with my best friend. What about you, Krista? What do you guys do?
So growing up, we didn't have a lot of family in town. So we often just do like the 4 of us with my parents and me and my brother. And then we would sometimes invite people, just like friends who didn't have somewhere to go or just weren't going away for that Thanksgiving. And so it was kind of nice. We would just spend more time with friends, maybe people we wouldn't normally spend the whole day with. So it was kind of nice. And then I like to make sweet potatoes in the crock pot. It's super nice. You actually use canned also sweet potatoes. I think I actually did try it with fresh one year, and it's better with canned. And then it's got like a brown sugar top. It just cooks in there for 2 hours. It is so easy. It's like the best thing to bring because I go like travel to a lot of Thanksgivings. I've never really hosted it. Like, it's kind of a rite of passage I have not had. But growing up, so, I mean, we have like the typical turkey, and actually, my mom is Canadian, so it's actually called dressing and not stuffing, just FYI. And she also would make acorn squash, which I learned, I guess, after I got married, I guess is when I figured out this is not an American dish. It's super good. It's made in the microwave, and it's got a lot of butter and honey.
So what is it?
Yeah, I was like, hold on,
Yeah,
you're going to
well,
explain this acorn squash. Like, what's it comparable to?
I mean, it's kind of like
In
butternut.
my head, I see like baby acorns that like squirrels harbor.
No,
so
acorn squash.
I need like
Here, I'm like holding up my hands. It's like the size of like a kid's soccer ball, like a tiny kid's soccer ball, and it's kind of looks like an acorn. It's like green, and it's a little bit stringy, and then the inside it's yellow, but it's not like gross stringy because you like mash it all up.
Is it like spaghetti squash? Is it the Canadian version of spaghetti squash?
I don't know. I just know it's called acorn squash.
And you put butter on it and put it in the microwave?
Yes, there's like something special maybe that you do with saran wrap, I think. My mom's going to be like, you don't know how to make acorn squash? Listening to this. And I don't know when you put the honey. I don't know when you put the honey in, but
it's
like very sweet. It's very sweet.
I will say I make a sweet potato souffle every year, and I boil the sweet potatoes. And you basically make the inside like a pie. It has milk and brown sugar and all the fall spices, and then a topping like pecan and brown sugar. So I would argue it's better than canned sweet potatoes.
Well, that's what I make because my grandma made that. So we grew our own sweet potatoes, and then we would crack our own pecans because my aunts and uncles have pecan trees. And so that's what I make because she made it and she gave me a recipe book. So that's very good.
Christie's like, I pick my sweet potatoes from the ground and I hand crack the nuts that go on top. Top that.
I'm sure it still tastes the same-ish.
I don't know. There's a lot more labor of love that goes into yours.
That's true.
Okay, I have a very important question to ask everyone, and that is, which type of pie do you prefer? Sweet potato, pecan, apple, pumpkin? Because I really feel like there's only one answer to this question.
I feel like that's a lot of pressure. What do you think, Christie?
It is. I say pecan for starters, but that's definitely dialectal. My mom used to make pecan pie, but now I know how many calories are in it, so I tend to shy away from it. I do like a good apple pie that's like warm with your melting vanilla ice cream on it, although maybe the point of Thanksgiving should not be to count calories.
I would agree with that point.
Yeah,
I will go so far as to say I don't like pumpkin pie. I will eat like I know, I don't like it.
Was that your one answer?
Well, I feel like if you know me, you know I like dessert, so I'm opinionated on this topic, but apple pie needs to have a crumb topping. I don't like the texture of pumpkin pie, but I'll eat like a pumpkin crunch cake. And I like pecan pie. That's how we say it, pecan.
Yeah, I was like, pecan. What's a pecan?
That's from the South. We say pecan.
Are there a lot of pecan tree? Now I can't say it. Pecan trees around your area? Cool. My friend had some, but I didn't
grow them. It is, yes.
Yeah, my friend growing up had a little mini orchard in her backyard, but I don't think it's that common around here.
I don't think it is here. Okay, so your answer?
My
official?
answer is pumpkin.
Like
well, my official answer would be, I guess, the homemade one. I'm always like, ooh, I want the one that's homemade. But
okay, so homemade. Do you eat it with ice cream or whipped cream?
Just whatever's available. I like the ice cream.
Okay. Do you have Costco where you are?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you get the Costco pumpkin pie?
I've never gotten the Costco pumpkin pie.
That's a big thing.
She just said she wants it homemade.
Oh, well, I know, but it's
people.
affordable and it's big. I guess if you like pumpkin pie, it's good. But I don't like pumpkin pie that much, so I don't know. Okay, so this is really interesting. We have very different opinions on pies. I feel like next time when we're all together sometime, we need to have a pie tasting contest. See what we like best. All right, so today we are talking about families in the literature. And I think in general, you might have books that are called family sagas. And I think probably a lot of the books we read might have family aspects, whether they're officially family sagas or not. So what makes a good family saga? I think by definition, a family saga is generally a genre that follows the lives of a family or multiple related families over time. So I think those would be some of the ideas of a family saga. I think it's living and experiencing a story through the lens of various family members. And when it's done well, we can see and feel each of these characters' emotions, even if they're in different generations or have different strengths, weaknesses, pros and cons. That's my thought. What do you two think?
I can't say I read a ton of family sagas, and I don't know why. And I think maybe part of it is that I don't feel that connection that you're talking about with the characters. I feel like as soon as I get into one character's point of view, then it's just moving on to the next one. And then I'm like, but wait, I liked that person. But I do have a few that I like. But I do like when the whole narrative comes together in the end, or it's got like an unexpected twist kind of in the end of like, oh, this is how they're all connected. I do like that. Usually I'm glad I read them, but then while I'm reading them, I'm kind of like, I don't know if I want to keep reading.
You're not sure?
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's good to like when you can really connect with each one of the characters. And that takes a lot of skill, I think.
I was going to say that. It's really hard to do, especially if you've got, kind of foiled characters against, one type versus another type working together.
True. And you don't have very long to develop that.
Right. Christy, how about you?
I tend to like when a bunch of dysfunctional family members have to come home, and usually it's for a death or a wedding, and some bombshell is dropped or some family secret is revealed. Then they all have to like come to terms with it in their own way, and they grow closer as a family unit, because I feel like everyone has their different personalities, and it's just the way they all kind of work together. I do prefer ones with a more happily ever after vibe, or at least a satisfying ending that leaves the family closer than the beginning of the book.
So have you read any good sagas? I think I've read a bunch of them. They might be categorized more as women's fiction or potentially romance or something along those lines. But one that stands out to me forever is the Francine Rivers duology, Her Mother's Hope and Her Daughter's Dream. And I read it so long ago, I actually could not tell you a whole lot about it, other than I remember as I was reading the mother story, having such strong feelings for the mother. And then when it transitioned to focus on her daughter, I remember just thinking, oh, I understand her daughter's perspective now. So it was like you like the different characters in different ways, and then you almost get frustrated with them for the way they act, but you kind of understand it too. So I just remember that relationship was complicated, but you could understand why they did the things they did. And then I think it spanned several years, in history. So there were a lot of historical elements that played into their journeys, like quite literally journeying across, new homes, new places, that type of thing. How about you
That's two? Is that 2 books?
It is, yes. Yeah. And it's Francine Rivers, which, we've talked about her before. She's special.
I've heard of those. I think my mom has read those. I need to add those to my list. Okay.
I remember reading a Sweet Valley High family saga eons ago, and it was about the history of that family's women, and it ended with Jessica and Elizabeth Wakefield, the famous Sweet Valley High twins. And I remember it being really good, but I honestly couldn't tell you that much more about it. And another one I read is The Memory Keeper's Daughter, and while I remember it being phenomenal, I don't remember a ton about it. I know it was about a doctor who his wife had twins in a blizzard, and his son was neurotypical, and his daughter had Down syndrome. So this is like in the 1960s. So he gave her, take her to an institute, but the nurse took her and raised her. And it's all about kind of their intertwining lives. And I won't ruin it. I mean, it's been out several years. But
I've heard
it's a
of
really
that.
beautiful story.
That one's been on my list for a long time, but maybe it's on my shelf. That sounds really good.
It was good.
That's cool. So it's all that a family saga, or would you just call it like a family story?
I mean, I wouldn't say it spans generations, but I still think, family is at the heart of it. So I'm not sure.
Cool. This sounds good. Have you heard of The Memory Keeper's Daughter, Kelly?
I have. I don't think I've read it, though.
Okay. Sounds really good. So I have a few that I've read that are like, I guess, how you would typically define family sagas that actually like go through the generations, and there's like multiple generations. So one I've enjoyed is Homegoing, and it's by Yaa Gyasi. So it's about 2 sisters who are born in 18th century Ghana. One is captured and sold as a slave, and the other is not. And so it follows both of them through the generations until present day. It really helped me see how just the evils of the past can be carried down through the generations. And I don't want to spoil the ending, but I did like how it ended. It was satisfying. Yeah, that was one of the ones that really sticks out in my mind. I just enjoyed it a lot. Every single character is connected, every storyline. Another one is 100 Years of Solitude. Have you guys heard of that one?
Yes, I've heard of it. I haven't read it, though.
So it's by Gabriel García Márquez. It's sort of a classic I'm really kind of one of the first people, to my knowledge, who's done magical realism. So it's a little bit whimsical in that way. And just tells a story of a Colombian family through the years. And there's a lot of revolt and rebellion going on in the community. Another one on my list is Pachinko, but I have not read it. And I think it's a Korean family.
Ooh, I think I've heard of that.
And I think it's a show now, which makes me really want to read it. And I think I had it and gave it away. And I'm like kicking myself.
That's the
I do
worst.
that all the time.
So what feelings are evoked within you in family stories?
I think I like seeing how every member is different, even if they have the same core values they started with due to their upbringing. I would say when you're raising your kids, you basically have the same values that you're endowing on each of those kids, but their different personalities just make them raise and grow up a little differently. And just their interactions and the way they handle different things, there's usually the one who looks like they have it all together, the sibling that's a complete hot mess. There's the judgy one, the rich one. You know what I mean? Like that.
Archetypes.
Yep. Yeah, that you have in those family dynamic stories, I think, which is fun.
You like the different personalities.
Is the feeling that it evokes is like you relate to it, or?
I would say yes,
relatable?
because I'll read it. I'm like, oh, that's cousin so-and-so. Ooh, that sounds like my aunt.
That's Carissa,
awesome.
She's going to be picturing us before we know it and her stories. For me, every time I read a mother and daughter story, I'll feel like I follow the mother's journey and I empathize so much with her. And then she becomes an adult and it's almost like she changes and I don't like her anymore. I get frustrated and angry, so those would be the emotions, at how she treats her daughter. But then, because I know the mother's story, because I had just read it, I almost feel an empathy for her because I understand where she's coming from. So I have this weird dance where I'm simultaneously frustrated and simultaneously empathetic or understanding. So I just read The Lilac Girls by Martha Hall Kelly. Have either of you read that one?
I think I've seen the title, maybe.
Okay, so it's a World War II story and thereabouts afterwards. But one of the main characters, I think her name is García, if I'm saying that right. She lived through a concentration camp. So we journey with her all the way through a concentration camp and the death of her mother in the concentration camp. And this death of her mom is such a formidable moment in her life. She obviously is devastated that her mom dies. But then she has her own daughter years down the road after surviving a concentration camp, and she's not that loving towards her daughter, and she's kind of mean, and she doesn't connect to her. So I get frustrated because I'm like, come on, you lost your own mom. Why can't you be nice to your own daughter? But then I also know everything that she lived through, and then I have that empathy where it's like, well, yeah, I can't even fathom what it would have been like to live through a concentration camp, much less how it would impact your relationships afterwards. So those are just some of the
know that
emotions.
from life, from history, that it's just like, that's kind of how that, the trauma in one generation, or like one person makes a bad choice and it just echoes down, That's a good point.
So my question is, you read a lot of mother-daughter, but you have 3 sons.
I know.
Raising a daughter is different. I'll tell you that. Especially because mine's 14, so I can understand the yelling aspect.
That is interesting. I don't know. But I mean, I think this is the thing I realize as a parent. Nobody really knows what they're doing. You think you know how to parent, but really we're just hoping and praying we're doing our best for our kids. I
tell my kids that all the time. When they're like, Mom, da-da-da, like they'll complain. I'm like, you know what? This is my first time. I haven't had kids in a previous life that I'm aware of. So we're all learning as we go, like give me some grace, and then we just kind of move on. But I do have to remind them that like I am not a pro parent and this is my first time. We're all learning.
Well, and like we've talked about before, a lot of times art reflects life. And I think that's probably why some of these stories resonate with me, because you can see how, like you said, Chris, trauma impacts people, generational trauma impacts the next generation. So I think it's actually really interesting to see now as a parent, I take the things I really like that my parents did, and my husband takes the things that he likes, and now we have our own style that we're combining together for our kids. And realistically, they'll do that when they have kids. They'll ditch some of the things that we did, and they'll take some of the things we did, and they'll do their own way. So I think it's just a fascinating topic across the board. What about the idea of found families? Have you read any of these, thought about these before?
I love the found family trope. I think there's lots. I'm sure there's a bunch that I'm not thinking of. But the first thing that came to my mind was the Louise Penny books. We sort of mentioned it. I think we mentioned it last episode. They're just mysteries, cozy-ish mysteries. It's got a same core cast of characters, each book. And they live in this small town in rural Quebec called Three Pines. And they sort of make a found family in a way. They're all very different, a little bit outcasts in a way. They've all decided to leave Montreal and leave the city for this remote little town for different reasons. And those reasons are explored throughout the stories. And then they solve mysteries together and support one another and just go through life together. And they're always having the most delicious feasts together as well.
And I had not even thought about that, even though we referenced those books last time.
Yeah.
And something to think about, too, is I think a lot of the romantic suspense books that are out there now, like especially Dana Pettrey's older Alaskan series would fall in this category of the found family, and Dee Henderson's series, the O'Malley's, or whatever series that was. And then if I think about all the series, basically, that come out now, it's always, you have that one found family, and you have the secondary characters, and then it's like the next book, one of those secondary characters that you liked, it's their turn to shine, and it's like you're already invested in that group of people, so it's like you keep reading the books.
I agree, and as both a writer and a reader, for whatever reason, I think stories become more real when they add the details like what meals they eat and what someone's house looks like. And it's the little things. It's imagining the fuzzy throw pillows on someone's couch or their favorite flavor of coffee or things like that that I think bring a humanity to a story. So I love that. I agree. Romantic suspense books have a lot of found family in them.
I was going to say, as a writer, it's fun to have those characters you created and loved for so long to show up for more than just one book. It's like you've invested so much research and time into creating this character, even a secondary one. So you want to give them another chance in another book. And then you have this whole family you get to continue writing about.
That's so true. So do you think the idea of found family is reflective of real life, or is it a figment of fiction?
I think it's idealized in fiction. But I still like it, even though I know that. And I think it's also a good reminder that God created us for community. Yeah, there's a reason that getting together and feasting feels so right. And I think it just reflects the way that, he created us to be beings that need each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like it shows up in reality in things like your Friendsgiving movement that's popular for those who don't have family in the area or are unable to go home. And I think a lot of churches, our church does like a Friendsgiving for their college student ministry. And I live in a heavy military community, so many of them are far, far away from their families. And they have a really good community with supporting each other and meeting for kind of a Friendsgiving thing.
And I think my answer to that is I don't think it's a figment of fiction. I think it's actually real life. I mean, I actually started this episode talking about my best friend and her husband and their kids coming to visit us. But my kids call them auntie and uncle. So they're not blood auntie and uncle, but they're every bit as much an aunt and uncle to my kids because they are found family to me. And I even think on a broader context, we as Christians oftentimes reference our church families, right? Like my church family stepped in and did this or whatever. Like, I don't know, like when I was in the hospital, my church family would take meals to me or pray for me or reach out to me. So I think there's a lot of variables or aspects that we can find family in real life that may not just be blood family. Oh, we didn't even get into the idea of adoption. I mean, there's adoption.
Oh, for sure. I was just thinking about like orphans, and I can't think of any specific books like right now, but lots of, oh my gosh, Anne of Green Gables, duh.
Oh, there you go.
Classic. Yeah. Like, that's a beautiful found family story.
Yeah. And then isn't one of the Francine Rivers books, I think one of the characters in the Mark the Lion series might have like adopted a kid, like a baby, and loved it like its own. I mean, I think there's a lot in fiction. It's just not on the tips of our minds.
I mean, there's Moses.
Oh, well.
Let's not forget him.
It's true.
You know, the Bible, the greatest book of all time.
There's a found family in there, I'm sure.
Well, that actually brings me to my next question. What tropes are pretty consistent with this genre? And I was going to say the prodigal son. I think we love the prodigal son story, and I think we see that all over in books. There's always the wayward child coming home and accepted back into the family, the black sheep, the forgiveness, the reconciliation. What about you guys? Do you have any thoughts on tropes in this genre?
I think there's definitely the tropes that's the conflict between generations, like values and viewpoints and expectations. A big one of this, probably especially in romance books, would be your mother-in-law's friction between, you know, the way you want to do things and the way your mother-in-law wants things done. Raising kids, like there's always those kind of frictions, I think. Especially if someone's trying to change a tradition, they'll meet some resistance from the older generation, I think.
Right. And I'm going to be the mother-in-law because I have 3 boys, so that's going to be me.
Just to throw a bit of a curveball into our genres we've been talking about today, a few books that I've read recently came to mind thinking about estranged family members. One of them I mentioned in the last episode. It's actually a horror novel, and it's called How to Sell a Haunted House. So it's got an estranged brother and sister in there. They have to work together to get rid of their haunted house. And then the other one is Home is Where the Bodies Are. And yeah, so they both have estranged siblings with some satisfying redemption. I just love these kind of extreme character arcs, kind of like, maybe that's why I like Enemies to Lovers so much. It's just so satisfying when the characters finally come together and resolve their differences after like hating each other so much. It's just love it.
I did read Home is Where the Bodies Are because you recommended that. And I do want to read the How to Sell a Haunted House because that one just sounds very interesting. And this one, the Home is Where the Bodies Are, had those familiar family dynamics, like your sibling that has it all together, the hot mess sister, and the other sister was the one who felt like she had done all the work with her sick mother and resented the other two, which I was going to say, Kelly, when you mentioned the prodigal son, you mentioned the welcoming and the forgiveness and all that, but you did not mention the angry sibling. Right? Who's overlooked.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point. It really is played out in that story like that.
It is.
It's true. And we see that a lot in books because there's generally an angry sibling in there. Mm-hmm. So how does history and the idea of pursuing dreams play into family sagas?
I think it goes back to the generational expectations. Like in my family, it was expected we would all go to college. We didn't really have a career like we had to do, but it was just kind of expected we would all go. And I feel like if there's a family business or a family farm, there's an expectation that the eldest will take over the business. And my husband and I are both business owners, and I'm pretty sure our kids are on a different path. And that is A-okay with us. But there's so many books that you read where it's like, the farming business, the eldest son doesn't want to inherit it, but the middle son does. And there's that friction because they don't communicate. And it's like,
yep. And the parents have those expectations.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, I actually wonder if this has shifted a little bit in our generation, but in previous generations, I think a lot of history, we see one generation wanting something better or more than the previous generation. So I'm thinking the expanse westward, for example. Life was not great in the East, so you had people moving west for land. You know, post-war, you'd have big booms in production and industry. I think there were a lot of hardships to endure, but they pursued because they had a hope for a different future. And like that innate gritty hope that was really hard, but they really hoped for something. So it made me actually think of my own grandmother who grew up in the Great Depression. She lived on a farm in Nebraska. And when I was younger, I remember her being judgmental and critical about people who would buy brand name toothpaste because the off-brand was better. Or I remember going to my dad one time and being like, Grandma said I could lick the bowl of brownies. And I was so excited. And he was not. He's like, okay, that's cool. But it's because she would get every last bit of the brownie batter out of the bowl and not leave anything because that was a product of her generation. So at the time, I probably didn't understand all of that. And now we understand, oh, if you grew up in the Great Depression, everything had a value. You couldn't waste anything. And probably her looking at us, we were so wasteful in comparison.
Oh, yeah.
So
My grandma, she would wash out Ziploc bags and dry them and reuse them.
Hey, I do that.
Yeah.
I do that.
Well, that's probably because it's good for the environment.
That is true. I do that because it's true. But my grandma grew up in the Great Depression, and she was like poor, like dirt floor poor. And I would be like in high school and say, Grandma, tell me about the Great Depression. And she would be like, what Great Depression? Like, it did not matter to them. Like, that's how poor they were. And she would, like, my granddaddy would buy her like pots and pans or whatever. And if it broke, my dad would make her like a makeshift wooden handle so she could continue using the pot. Never mind, at Christmas, would buy her a new pot. Nope. She always used the old stuff. Like, she just made it work.
Huh. That's fascinating.
it is. So it'll be interesting to see when our kids have kids, how are they different than us? Okay, what are some books with excellent feasts? Can you think of any?
Well, in Little Women, the March family has a Christmas feast, which they famously give away to a family in need. Kind of the first thing that I thought of. And then their neighbor, Lori, gives them a feast. But they don't know that they're going to get that when they go to give away their meal they've been looking forward to so much. I was also thinking about Louise Penny, who I mentioned earlier, her books, her Inspector Gamache series. There's always at least one pivotal scene surrounding a meal, like some plot points being played out, some tension between characters, or they figure out something with the mystery. That she's really good at describing every dish in great detail. Like, I come away so hungry, like with my mouth watering, because it just sounds so delicious. And it's like this French influenced cuisine. It's so good. And I actually think there's a cookbook that the publisher has put out there.
I did not know that. I was thinking of Harry Potter, where the food just appears and there's all this ambience from floating candles. And I was like, that would be such a nice place to eat. And then there's The Hobbit, and I'm thinking more of the movie, because I have not read the books, where the dwarves come and they consume all of Bilbo's food, and he's just getting so frustrated. It's kind of like a funny moment before they set off on this dangerous adventure. And I was going to say, regarding Louise Penny, I know there's some books out there. I feel like it does happen more in cozy mysteries. Well, there'll be a recipe mentioned in the book or some meal food, and then the end will have like their actual recipe at the end of it. It'd be cute if I was a decent cook, but thankfully my husband can cook.
Oh, man.
And I'm always a sucker for a moment in a romantic suspense book where the mystery's intense and everyone's in danger and they go to the safe house or whoever's house they've decided is the safe place and have a meal. I just love that moment. And they usually, of course, talk about the case and there's a little romance that's involved there. I just read Lynn Blackburn's Dive Team series, and one of her characters showed food through love. And of course it makes me hungry. It's like she made muffins that went with the coffee. And I just
shows love through food.
Yes. Yeah, that was like her character trait. That's her way of expressing herself. So I always love that.
I was just thinking when you started saying that about the Marvel movie at the end, where they're all eating like shawarma and they're all just like exhausted from all this fighting.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And did you know, fun fact about that is that they actually added that scene later because people thought that the ending of the movie did not feel satisfying, because before that, they're all just going off in their separate directions. And their test audience didn't like that, and so they went back and added that scene with them eating shawarma.
I do. I like that scene.
Wait, what movie is that one?
The Marvel, the first Avenger ones, where they're all together.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I can't believe I didn't even say this before. I don't know why I didn't think of this, but one way that fairy tales always end, like the Grimms with the happy ending, they end with either a marriage or a feast, which I feel are both very biblical images. Anyways, so that's why anytime a story ends in a feast, I'm like, biblical image, so satisfying.
This takes a dark turn here because I'm that kind of person. Have you ever read the children's story Hecate Peg?
No.
No? Oh my goodness, we got the library. It's this kid's book, and the illustrations are beautiful, which I'm a sucker for. But basically, this mom leaves her like 9 kids alone while she goes to the market because they've been great. And she tells them, like, don't let anybody in. Well, of course, this witch, Hecate Peg, comes in. Basically, Hecate Peg, spoiler alert, turns the kids into food. So then the mom has to, and she carts off this whole wheelbarrow of food. And then the mom has to come. And then she, based on what her kids asked her to get them at the market, pairs with the food they turned into. So she has to like mentally match all that up in order to save her kids. Sorry, that was a side note. Don't read your kids that book, probably.
Funny. Is it a picture book or like?
Yeah, it's like an illustrated. Yeah, it's like definitely a picture book.
Well, how does it end?
Well, she gets her kids back and the witch runs away and falls in the water. Just like we talked about with our horror episode, how there's that ambiguous ending. She falls in the water, quote unquote, never to be seen again.
It starts in little kids' picture books.
These are the stories I read my kids growing up. Don't let strangers in the house. Cautionary tales. See? It all comes full circle. Okay, sorry. That was definitely a segue. But when we're talking about feasts, I would say most feasts are decadent, these rich affairs, but you have the flip side of these disastrous meals or these moody meals, like in Wuthering Heights. It was memorable for its bleakness and just hostility, and the meal reflects this rough, unwelcoming nature of the Earnshaw family and just like this harsh atmosphere.
I think that's a good point because it's like an anti-feast. It's been so long, or like an anti-communion, anti-community.
Anti-welcoming.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've read that book, but that makes sense because it's so dysfunctional, everyone's relationship in that story. So it's almost like highlights their lack of
Which it
community.
goes to show the importance of food one way or the other and how it just really does. Feasts, food, meals, how they can contribute to the emotions in a scene, whether that's positive or negative.
Mm-hmm. And with Odysseus in the Odyssey, there's this feast of Cyclops Polyphemus where he's eating Odysseus's men. So another not great feast.
Well, and I'm thinking of Oliver, like, please, sir, I want some more. Is that a book or is that just a musical? Like the
It's a book.
It's a book.
Oliver Twist.
Yeah.
Charles Dickens.
Mm-hmm. Right. Is that a book? Chris was like, it's Charles Dickens.
It's by Charles Dickens.
I was just thinking when I was in the Oliver musical in high school, and I can just hear the voices like,
it's a musical.
Please, sir, I want some more. But yeah, the food, the slop, the oatmeal, whatever it was. Anyway, moving on.
Taste and see that the Lord is good.
I know, it's true.
You know, it's so interesting that it's so important, even in the Bible.
It is. Our church does baptisms, and we always have a big feast afterwards. And where we live, barbecue
cool.
is a big deal. So it's like a big celebration, pool party, because it's a celebration. So.
And we have to clarify, though, barbecue in the West and barbecue in the East are two totally different things.
Oh, I know.
I was so disappointed when I lived in California, and my roommate told me we were having a barbecue, and I was like, yes, pig. And she's like, ew. Like, it was just hot dogs and hamburgers. I'm like, this is not a barbecue.
Okay, to clarify, I would like to say I live on the central coast of California, and tri-tip was like originated here. So
I didn't even know what that was until I met you.
Okay, yeah. So my husband, I didn't know what it was until I met my husband, but it is a big cultural thing. We make tri-tips here. So we do tri-tip barbecue. So when we say barbecue, that's what we mean. Tri-tip, it's like steak it's like a triangle cut of steak, and you cook it over open fire, generally with oak wood, and it gets the oak taste. Yeah, it's very good. It's a whole
my church does, we roast a pig for our Pentecost festival.
Ooh,
thank you, pig.
And we have like
fun.
Lots of games and stuff like that.
So what is barbecue to you, Carissa?
Usually it's like pulled pork.
Okay,
and then it has like a bunch of sauce. And then, or you could do
now you have more ketchup-based sauce, right?
Not necessarily. I don't really know. I'm not an expert, but I know Kansas City barbecue is pretty like well known.
Do you go to someone's house for a barbecue? Like, is that like a weekly thing?
Yes, or not like a weekly thing, but we will say like, do you want to grill out? And then it might be, if we're just grilling out, it might be hot dogs and hamburgers.
Yeah, that's what we say.
Grilling out. Yeah, we never say that. We would never say grill out. We would say
that's
barbecue.
Funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I love linguistics.
I do too. It's so fascinating. Okay, so what would your favorite character in all of the world bring to a Thanksgiving dinner?
It's really hard to only pick one, but Little Women made me think of Jo March. So she's the sister. I think she would bring a gingerbread loaf that she almost certainly burned because she was too busy writing.
I love it.
And that might be me too. She'd like aim for something really sweet and good, and it would just not turn out.
I was going to say, I couldn't even think of a favorite character, much less what they would bring to a Thanksgiving dinner. So I will go with the current book I'm reading, which is The Lost Library by Melissa Coslin. And her main character, Callie, is always on the run. So dinner would probably be found family, and it would be something she could swing by and pick up. So maybe like a Bojangles big bow box, or like your Costco pumpkin pie, something like that.
Okay,
Sorry,
wait.
what is a
hold on?
What's a Bojangles?
We're both wondering, what is Bojangles Big Bow Box?
You don't know what Bojangles is?
No.
Bojangles is like your fast food. They have like breakfast all day, but it's like your biscuits. Do you know what biscuits are, or do you have rolls? I mean, like it's like breakfast.
Like a butter biscuit?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it has like, there's like the cheddar bow, which is like your biscuit with like melted cheese. You can get like a sandwich with sausage, egg, and cheese. You can get a bowberry biscuit, which is blueberry with a whole like sweet glaze on it for you dessert people.
Sounds
But
delicious.
no, they make like your tailgating boxes. So you could just go get like a giant box, and it's like chicken with like 5 sides. Kind of like a KFC, but they just are more biscuity. I don't know.
Huh.
Interesting.
Guess
I
you
do
don't
know
have
what biscuits
Bojangles
are.
out there.
We don't have Bojangles, no. Okay, I totally felt like I cheated on this question, but I also couldn't think of a favorite character. So I went with the favorite character that I've ever written. Her name is Amy Haskins. She's never been published yet, but she wants to be a chef. And so she's always making food. And spoiler, I usually come up with what she makes based on like what I had for dinner the night before, but I just make it fancier than fancier than I can make. I just make it sound better. But she does kind of home style recipes with a twist. So she would do a traditional Thanksgiving meal, but instead of just a basic turkey, she would have a special herb glaze on it. She would have mashed potatoes with probably whatever herbs and flavors would enhance mashed potatoes. So that's what she would do. And then she'd have a unique pumpkin pie that is not just straightforward. So,
Well, it has to be a
Like pumpkin
maple
cheesecake?
pumpkin pie.
she would probably do a pumpkin cheesecake. Yeah, that would be good. I like that. She would. I'm going to make her make a pumpkin cheesecake in some scene now, just for fun.
I have had a character, though, they've had like food truck, whatever food truck I had, I would just be like, oh, this is what they're having tonight. And because I'll just describe it since I just ate it. So if you ever read one of my stories and there's food in it, more than likely I've eaten it. I've not cooked it, but I've eaten it.
Well, on this note, on food, family, and feasts, we hope that as you head into the holiday season, you enjoy all of the above: food, family, feasts, and I'll even add in some fiction. And if you happen to spend some time reading over the holidays and you come across any food or family themes, we would love to hear from you. Send us a note on Instagram, find each of our handles. We would love to hear from our listeners.
And let's end on a quote. Let us be grateful to people who make us happy. They are the charming gardeners who make our souls blossom. And that was by Marcel Proust. And don't forget to rate and review on your podcast platform, and follow us on Instagram at Lit Ladies Pod and on Facebook at Literature Ladies Pod. Thanks for joining us on our literary journey.